Hello, hello, hello. Hello, LinkedIn Live. We are live. Hey, Rico.
Hey,
How you doing?
I am brilliant. Yeah, I'm a little tired because I've just got back
Yeah.
from the Berlin International Film Festival, but it's all good. It's very good.
Rico, you are such a jet setter. As I always say, you're one of Birmingham's best exports.
I want that to stick, just so
Lon-
everyone knows.
London stole you.
Definitely did, yeah.
So good to have you on, Rico. I always enjoy our conversations. We met. When did we meet? Was it 2017 when I was doing the film festival? Is that when it was?
Yeah, it was. So we met from Black Star, the legacy of Black Star, and then like those meetings that we had to try and discuss what
Yeah.
happened afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody else agrees. I think somebody else is agreeing that I can't decide whether they're agreeing that you're Birmingham's best export or that you've been stolen.
A little bit about.
Anyway, great to have you. Yeah, and you're in London today, but you've been super busy, so we're going to get into all of that. So obviously, I've been absolutely dying to have this conversation, Rico. So it is LGBT plus History Month.
Mhm.
And for those that don't know, the theme is actually hashtag behind the lens. So Rico is, I don't know how to describe you, filmmaker extraordinaire, all sorts of things, storyteller, advocate, film festival, man about town. Sorry, I mean, yes, he's Birmingham's best export. He is Birmingham's best export. Have I left anything out, Rico? Filmmaker, film festival fan,
Just programmer. Yeah, programmer, working inclusion.
curator.
Yeah. A bit of everything. I tried to understand the way that the industry worked, to best serve, I guess, the future of the industry.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And one of the legacies as well, one of the things I always associate you with is CineQ, which is, one of your, I guess one of your, kind of first babies, if I call it that, in Birmingham, the CineQ Film Festival. And so maybe that's a good place to start actually, because do you want to just talk about CineQ and why you started that and how it came about?
Absolutely. So I, at the time, was working as part of a program, an amazing program, from Independent Cinema Office called ICO Feds, which stands for Film Exhibition Distribution and Sales.
Mhm.
And they house you in an organization for about 8 months, pay you London living wage. And I was actually housed in Flatpack Film Festival in Birmingham, incredible festival. And during my time there, I basically learned all there is to know about the production side of a festival. So, like, how to pull together a festival and what the different parts of that were. Um, but observationally, I knew that I wanted a focus in something, and I wanted to focus on something that I felt was lacking in the UK. And I was having a conversation with my line manager actually, and the conversation was about piracy. And whilst we both agreed that piracy was harmful to the industry, although we understood the complexity of lack of access for people from low income and working class backgrounds, cinemas in Birmingham at that time weren't really showing black or BIPOC film on screen, nor were they showing queer film on screen.
Yeah,
And so the conversation we had is like, for those audiences, the only way for them to engage in film that represents them
yeah,
is by going to streaming platforms. And my line manager's argument was like, well, if it doesn't exist, why don't you just build it? And I was like, yeah, I will. And at first it was like that kind of, not that I love my line manager, but it was a kind of internal spite. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this.
yeah.
So I kind of set up this community cinema called CineQ, and it had a specific focus on queer, trans, and sex people of color, QT BIPOC people. And it started off as a community cinema running out of Centrale every 2 months. We promised that like at least 50% of our program was going to be dedicated to QT BIPOC. And that was mostly because of like trying to generate audiences. There was already a queer film audience and a queer audience in the city, but was there a QT BIPOC audience? I don't know. So I was trying to facilitate that, but also to get our white allies in the community to watch a lot of QT BIPOC film to understand the lived experiences of QT BIPOC people. And so that kind of grew. And after about 2 years, it turned into a festival. So we had our first festival, which spanned 4 days over the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham, Mockingbird. And then we had events at Centrala as like a nod to like where we started, usually focusing on shorts programs. And then we were due to have our second festival, which unfortunately didn't happen because of COVID. And so we tried to take things digitally online. I tried to almost match the program that was going to be shown at the festival digitally. Obviously, for some films, those weren't available. Some films became available on the Criterion collection, which was joyful. And so I shared links to those. And other times I was trying to figure out the best way to show films digitally and still have that community feeling, I guess, that was missing. So yeah, that was the journey of CineQ, and I guess it still is the journey of CineQ. I do plan to come back to it sometime. I just feel I just feel like it's a bit ingenuous that I've like moved to London when CineQ was born for Birmingham, and how do I program and direct a festival in Birmingham when I'm based in London? It doesn't feel right. So I guess that like I'm looking for people that are interested in programming film in Birmingham that can come on that journey with me, so it doesn't just feel like I'm holding it.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, and Jay's made this comment, great to see representation of other fellow queer people of colour, rising stars. Rico is definitely a rising star. It's interesting you say actually about, looking to work with more people from Birmingham and you being London. What I'm starting to see, certainly through some of the projects I'm involved in, is a lot more cross-fertilisation, if I use that. I'm seeing a lot more collaborative working now between like sort of London and the regions, if we call it that, which is really cool, actually. I think more of that would be good, rather than just the usual talent drain that there is to the south, particularly with the arts. You know what I mean? So interesting. So CineQ, and this links to something that was on LinkedIn, which we were talking about just before this. So let's just talk a little bit about the Q words, and we're going to get into the filmmaking thing, but it's interesting. The term queer. What are your thoughts on that in terms, and I know we've had this conversation before, but sometimes people are a little bit, is it okay to use that word? Is it a reclaim? Is it a bit, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I like the word queer. I use the word queer. I describe my sexuality as queer. I don't say gay, and that's a lot of the reasons around that is because I identify as non-binary. My pronouns are he/they, and so whilst I don't prescribe to a lesbian woman, and I'm not pansexual, I'm not bisexual, and I'm also not a gay man, queer feels like the only thing that encompasses that experience. And I do understand the hesitance. I also grew up in a time where queer was used as a slur. I have mixed feelings about the reclaiming the word argument, because like I have mixed feelings about reclaiming the M word as well. But I ultimately feel like when I say queer, because its original meaning of being like slightly atypical or strange, it kind of like encompasses like my lived experience, and I feel okay with that. And I feel good with reclaiming the original definition of the word. So I use it. And I feel like it should be used, because the thing is, with a lot of LGBTQIA plus people, we have to go into a conversation and talk about our lived experience, which often encompasses trauma whenever we meet someone new. Because we're gay, there's always a story, and there's always people that want to draw out that story. I don't feel like that happens to the same degree with cis and heterosexual people. And so instead of having to talk about the fact that I'm demisexual and not quite just queer, so not just gay, like I feel like queer just encompasses all of it in one go, so I don't have to talk through my trauma with someone that I just met.
Cool. Amazing. Thanks for that, Rico. Hopefully that helps a lot of people. And then we've got this one comment here. I watched the movie Joyland. I haven't heard of that. Are you aware of that, Rico? I'm guessing
I love Joyland. Yeah, it's great. I'm glad you watched it.
Which is about the trans community in Pakistan. So refreshing to watch. We need more of this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You should check out a queer South Asian producer called Neeraj Churi, who's got a film in the Flare program. I can't remember what the name of the film, but look up Neeraj Churi and you'll find it. It's also premiering at South by Southwest this year.
Oh, amazing. Brilliant. Yeah, great. No, that sounds absolutely brilliant. And that thing about you know, the representation, especially if it's in communities where you don't usually see it, you know, like in, for example, the South Asian community, and in the same, you know, with communities of color, the Black community in particular, as we both know, you know, typically was very sort of like, you know, homophobic and transphobic. So
yeah,
that representation in those communities is amazing. So let's just talk about representation in film then. So that this is a nice sort of segue. You know, what are your thoughts about where representation is at the moment, where it's going? Has it gone far enough? Is there more that needs to be done? What are your thoughts on it? Queer representation in film.
I think that queer representation in film is definitely growing.
Yeah,
I don't think it's there yet, and I don't think it's adequately resourced.
yeah,
Like for queer people, LGBTQIA plus people, we spent so much of our lives having to relate to straight characters on screen to enjoy
mm,
films. And those were held and centered in predominantly straight spaces. Like if I went to the cinema and watched a romance, I'd be surrounded by straight couples, even though I was queer and had to relate to the characters on screen to kind
yeah,
of get that empathy boost that you go to the cinema for, that some people go to the cinema for. What I would like to see is queer films to be resourced as well as some of the 90s rom-coms were, or resourced as well as like we see like Love Simon and other films like that. And it's good that we're going on a journey like Bros that was released last year. And it's good that we're going on that journey, but I want to see a greater diversity of film that's adequately resourced. I also think about intersectionality and like authentic authorship a lot. So like when talking about the Black trans experience, for example, like I want to see Black trans people behind the camera. I want to see Black trans people like writing the scripts. I don't want to see an all white or predominantly white cast and crew creating a story that's from a minoritized community. I went to a really interesting talk at Berlinale, which spoke about specifically for docs, and it was run by DAY, which is the Documentary Association for Europe, about are documentary filmmakers good people? Because inherently, documentary filmmakers, it's in some small way go to give visibility to the story, yes, but ultimately the success of the doc is as important. So is it exploitative? Is it in its essence exploitative? And it was really, really interesting to explore those themes, especially through a queer lens, where a lot of the stories being told about us previously weren't for us. I mean, I look to Portrait of Jason, which is like a film from the 60s, which features like a interview in a Chelsea hotel with the subject Jason, who's like a sex worker, and how the kind of crew climb with alcohol and try to unravel him during that period of time.
okay,
Or films like Check It, which follow like queer disadvantaged youths that are Black on the streets of New York that form a street gang to be able to protect themselves, and some of the voyeurism that's in place in Check It and the way the camera angles zoom in. There's one scene where one of the trans or non-binary people in the film speak to their experiences of trigger warning sexual assault, and the camera zooms in and like focuses in, and that made me uncomfortable because it was clear that in that moment that subject didn't want to be filmed. And so yeah, I mean there's lots of complexity towards representation, but also centering care in representation and in filmmaking generally. The amount of sets I've been on where we're working like 14-15 hour days, everyone's burnt out, everyone's exhausted, and you have to get that one shot. And I want to see a resource made for care being centered in our making as well as our stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you were talking about the films there, it reminded me of the Paris is Burning film as well, because I know there was a lot of sort of almost like similar controversy after that, wasn't there? Because the filmmaker obviously sort of like did quite well, and you know, but you know, there's actually some quite sorry endings actually to the people that were in the film itself. So I thought that was quite interesting. The one question I have actually that connects to this is um what in terms of representation, what do you think comes first? Is it representation in TV, as in like you think of say the likes of Netflix and some of the, you know, the sort of series and shows and stuff, or is it film? Which one drives which?
I would say it's all connected.
Yeah,
I would personally say if we're talking about TV, and I mean old school TV in the 90s and noughties, early noughties,
yeah,
where you had a TV at home and you had satellite TV, or you had terrestrial TV, and those shows would be on all the time. I learned a lot about myself through
Mm,
EastEnders, about the
mhm.
British identity through EastEnders and
Yeah,
Hollyoaks, and so seeing representation in those shows, which were on every
yeah,
day, that were almost a part of my life. Like
yeah,
when I was in university, I did my dissertation on the normalization of queer culture through soap operas, because a lot of the queer stories that I saw when I was younger, outside of Skins, was through soaps. It was through
yeah,
Coronation Street or
yeah.
Emmerdale or EastEnders, and I saw a noticeable difference to the way that when I first came out at 13, like the way that my mom would treat me when it was just alien to her, coming from like a pseudo-religious background,
Mm,
and then watching EastEnders, where she kind of understood the characters on the screen and tried to relate that to her own son, and like
mm,
the difference in treatment during that period was like palpable for me, so it always interested me. So if I had to choose, I would choose that era of
yeah,
TV. But I think more and more TV is almost a platform for long form film.
yeah,
So, whereas TV used to be short form, and it used to be like little snippets that you'd like, and evolving storylines. Now it's a place for filmmakers to make a 10-hour or a 12-hour
yeah,
film,
yeah,
and have it set over multiple different
yeah,
editions. So I feel like that's very interconnected now.
yeah. It's interesting, and the reason I ask is because I have become more aware, I guess maybe over the past couple of years, because of lockdown and everybody was just binging on Netflix and whatever. But I've certainly become a lot more aware of, with Netflix in particular,
Mm.
a much, much broader range of representation from all sorts of walks of life.
Mhm.
But I'm not necessarily seeing it come through as fast in the film making space. I'm sort of trying to get my head around why. Maybe it just takes a while. Do you know what I mean? As you say, for people to get used to watching the series and the show, and then it comes into the soaps and all of that, and then it kind of hits the films. Because I guess with the films, it's a bigger gamble, isn't it, in terms
Yeah.
of budgets and everything? Yeah.
Yeah, and also like the way that Netflix was a completely new system to build, and they
Yeah.
built it in a time where progress was very visible,
Yeah.
whereas film is based on a very antiquated system that will take longer to evolve. And so, like, if we look at Netflix, when they built Netflix and they knew what they wanted to do, I'm assuming, and although Netflix has its problems with visible like diversity in their team,
Mm,
their kind of films are um, and films and TV and content
yeah.
are very, very diverse on their platform. Whereas film, we're trying to change, we're trying to change the root and not the fruit. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to just like show you a better diversity of everyone on screen.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that the opportunity is equitable behind the camera as well. We want to make sure that stories are equitable, and to do that, because we have to acknowledge that historically marginalized communities, whether that is queer communities or Black communities or South Asian communities or Southeast and East Asian communities,
Mm,
have previously been comparatively under-resourced compared to our white, cisgender, heteronormative counterparts.
yeah.
And that requires some systemic change, and that systemic change requires time.
Yeah.
And whilst I do think we're moving slower than we should,
Yeah.
I do know why. Yeah.
Let's talk about film festivals.
Yeah.
So when we met, I was doing a season of the Black International Film Festival. So I was sort of curating that, and as you said, you were involved in Flat Pack, and then you were creating, and then you went on to create CineQ and all of that sort of stuff. Let's talk about the importance of film festivals and how they help to drive representation in film making. And I know one of the questions I asked you, I think many years ago, was, do we still need, and in quote unquote, a black film festival? And I guess it would be the same, do we still need queer film festivals? Do we still need, what are your thoughts on this?
I think we absolutely do. And I think there are two separate reasons for this. I think the first reason I have is queer people need more safe spaces to enjoy things that aren't alcohol. Like, a lot of our community is based around alcoholic spaces, is based
Okay.
around nightlife.
Right.
And in London, that's slightly different because there is more things to do. There are more things to do. There are more places to go. But
Okay.
out in the regions, it's still it's very similar. The queer spaces that don't
Okay.
involve drinking or dancing are fair and few between, and that's because that's how we've established our spaces and historically had to establish our spaces because of society and the way that we were ostracized. So we do understand the context to it. But I also feel like that's inevitably harmful, and we're seeing more and more of that as we move forward, especially for people that wish to be sober. They feel like they have a community, or their community is very small. And I think queer film festivals center queer perspectives in a way that not normal, that non-queer film festivals don't. I also feel like queer stories on screen with a queer audience, that is something that I could never replicate in my wildest dreams. It's such a homecoming feeling. It's absolutely divine. And so that's my first reason. But then my second reason is we're still not seen as typical by the industry. Like, queer films are still not seen as marketable. And I think that is because we as queer people were forced to show up for heteronormative and cisgender films because that's all we had. So I would watch, completely blanks, The Breakup Plan, or any kind of rom-com like that, and I would like empathize with the female lead character because that's what I would have to do. Straight audiences don't empathize with queer content. They don't show up to watch queer film in the same way that we have to show up to watch straight film. And so the industry still views queer film as this thing on the side that's only available for queer audiences. And if you look at like film as a business, separately from film and like an art form, film as a business, if 11% of the population go and watch a film, it's never going to make enough money as if 50% of the population go and watch a film. So it's treated as such. And so until straight audiences show up for us like we showed up for you, and then until you recognize, and until the society recognizes that queer stories are stories of society more broadly, we aren't a small section of society, then we do need spaces that are dedicated to showing our work, because otherwise it wouldn't be shown.
And here's the thing, in terms of what you're saying there, I mean, I've got a couple of questions about how we do that, and there's something about how maybe there's something about the stars, the big name actors actually that could maybe help to push this agenda. But a story that I could share with you, when I was doing the film festival, I think that 2017 season, actually, we wanted to show, I won't name the cinema that it was, but we wanted to do a special screening of Moonlight. And that particular cinema said to us, they said, well, you're already quite niche because it's a Black film festival, and then you want to go to like a niche within a niche. They were like, we wouldn't recommend it in terms of just for the sales. But and obviously then it went on, and they really worked the film festival circuit, which I think is very interesting, just as a case study for filmmakers in terms of how to do that. But what was interesting when I watched that film, and we did we ended up showing The Pass. I don't know if you remember The Pass. So we showed that. And the thing is, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, but I think the thing that you realise, especially with a film like Moonlight, these films are love stories. They're love stories, and they're about coming of age and self-acceptance and authenticity and all of that. All things that anybody can identify with, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And you're absolutely right in terms of once hetero people get past the mind barrier or the mind block, it's just a love story. Really. Do you know what I mean? It's a love story.
Absolutely that. I couldn't agree enough. I feel like so much of the lack of acceptance around queer communities comes from the sexualization of the LGBTQIA plus community. Like, all of our interactions about sex, and we've seen it with the No Outsiders protests in Birmingham, it was because instantly when people think about the LGBTQIA plus community, they think about sex, and they thought it was inappropriate to teach children about sex, which it is, but that wasn't what was being taught. And so I feel like that transcends the No Outsiders conversation into how straight audiences perceive gay audiences generally. And I think that is in part because the LGBTQIA plus community is more sex positive. But that doesn't mean all our interactions are revolved around sex. Like,
absolutely.
I don't want to say love is love because I think it's gross, but like, love is love. And I think that once you start to empathize with a person's lived experience rather than the things you perceive as like a fetish or sexualized, you'll start to get past that.
Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely hit the nail on. It's the fetishization. That's what almost becomes that barrier to kind of just accepting it for what it is, kind of thing, and just looking at it, through sort of open eyes.
Mhm.
And then going back to, there is something about, I don't know what your views are on, and I'm thinking specifically, there's a series on Netflix with, I'm going to say, what's his name, Neil Patrick.
Uncoupled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I sort of think with stars like him, and stars of that ilk, rather than getting, say, Colin Firth why not why not get these sort of these bigger names, sort of queer and trans actors do you see that happening, and do you think that would help in kind of getting the representation and getting the audiences out? Do you know what I
Yeah, no, I do. I think that, and I do to a certain extent think that queer talent is making themselves more accessible. But
mean?
like with any celebrities, like queer, there is a pay gap between queer talent and heterosexual talent. And
Right.
so if you imagine that every single time they have to show up to a space, if they're well-known actors, they have to come with security guards, they have to come with this, they have to come with that. So
Right.
there's a cost
Yeah.
associated with that. I think one thing that talent can do to help is
Yeah.
create inclusion riders. We've seen it with Michael B. Jordan, who creates an inclusion rider that says he requires this many members of the crew and this many members of the cast to be from Black and global majority backgrounds, from
Yeah.
historically marginalized backgrounds. I think that we've now just reached a point where like queer talent can also demand inclusion riders. If
Mhm.
I'm going to be part of this project and I will bring so much to your project, then I demand that there is representation behind the screen as well as in front of the screen. And I feel like that's especially important for trans talent, trans men and trans women and non-binary people, because I feel like there's an element of safety within that as well. Like at the BFI, we have wellbeing facilitators on each of our productions, and not just for that reason, but that is one of the reasons to make safe environments on set.
Yeah.
I feel like as we, as a society, move towards more of a trans exclusatory narrative, which is happening,
Mm.
that will seep into workspaces like sets, and sets are like one of the most unregulated spaces in the world, which is why there's so much discourse about like bullying, harassment,
Yeah.
etc. on set. And so to have that safety, it's really important that you have allies on set.
Yeah.
So I think inclusion riders are the way to move forward, as
Yeah.
well as things facilitators.
Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, the inclusion riders. It's really interesting. One of the venues that I'm at today, which, so they're an arts venue,
Mm,
and we've talked there about how do they ensure that artists and promoters and whoever that's coming into that space,
mm,
make that journey towards kind of inclusive teams and structures. Yeah, it's definitely something we need to work on. But yeah, inclusion riders, I can see how that can definitely help.
mm.
So what are you working on at the moment? I know, as we start to wrap up, I know you're working on like a million different things. What exciting film festivals or film projects are you working on at the moment?
Oh, what am I working on at the moment? So I've just got back from Berlin International Film
Mhm.
Festival, where we brought a cohort of amazing filmmakers from Black and global majority backgrounds with us. One of them being Niraj Churi that I mentioned earlier. Another
Mm.
one was Sarud Zaya Mafuru. Then there was Aisha Scott and Cherry Shoteka, who was the
That's
producer of The Black Cop, who won the BAFTA short film last year.
yeah.
It was an incredible experience. They're an amazing cohort. I loved every minute of it. It was so much fun. I'm terribly exhausted, but I'm feeling positively about it. I've also been working on the some work with the Anti-Racist Task Force European Film. I wanted to give them a shout out because they're going for a bit of a difficult time at the moment because of a film that played at Berlinale and the press that we're getting around that. Yeah, and then next week I'm going to Berlin. No, I'm going to Dublin International Film Festival because I have judged the real art competition for film, and some of the films are being screened at Dublin International Film Festival. And then I get a little bit of a break, and then it's Flair. It's BFI Flair from the BFI LGBTQIA plus festival in London. The program is up, so have a look. Some things are already sold out, so go and get a move on. And hopefully, we're bringing a cohort of queer Nigerian filmmakers over from
Oh,
Nigeria to
oh,
visit the festival,
that's
and
groundbreaking,
and,
really.
and talk about like why queer filmmaking is so important for hostile spaces, and also like what we can do as representatives of a global north and they're the global south. What can we do to properly resource like queer filmmakers living in potentially hostile environments? And then I'm off to Outfest, which is like the last thing I'm doing, like in this part of the year anyway, because I need to kind of like rest.
Yeah. Recharge. I don't know how you do
it. I run on like caffeine and
your Birmingham's best export. And just to finish off, I guess the final thing I would ask you is what can, you know, you were talking about what the hetero community can do. What can allies do to support, queer representation in filmmaking? What is it that we can do?
Show up. I mean, I think we underestimate the industry gives us an idea, the film industry gives us an idea that audiences are the least important part of the industry. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Almost all of the profit in the film industry comes from audiences. It comes from festivals. It comes from ticket sales. You show up and it directly contributes to a change in the industry. I talk about this a lot, like the change that I saw after Moonlight winning awards and getting sold out screenings, and that leading directly to more QT BIPOC films being funded, resourced, and more queer films generally being funded and resourced because there was a demand for stories. And although there's something to be said, Moonlight is an incredible film, like as a standalone film, it's an incredible film. There's something to be said about Black trauma being monetized, whilst like films about Black joy aren't given the same resource, and that is a conversation to have. But I definitely saw how the gates opened after Moonlight, and that was directly to do with audiences. All of the power is held by audiences. We are audience facing industry, because without audiences we don't have an industry. We'd just be talking to ourselves.
And I would say, as somebody that ran a film festival, I would say support your local independent film festivals as well. Find out what's going on, go and check out some film. There is some amazing films, and there may not be feature length, there'll probably be some shorts, but you will see some amazing stuff, and it will really sort of blow your mind. So I would definitely say go and do that. Film festivals are important for sure.
They are, yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much, Rico, for your time. Where can people find you, like in terms of on socials and stuff like that, if they want to connect with you and find out more about what you're doing?
Sure, you can find me on Instagram at Rico, RICO, J for Johnson, S for Sinclair _. You can find me on Twitter at Rico RKLJ. And you can find me at LinkedIn, and I will comment under this video afterwards, so you can just add me directly. But yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And we're getting a few thank yous in. So it's been a treat. Thank you so much for joining it. I knew I was going to enjoy this one. We're going to have to do this again. Thank you so much, Rico. Enjoy the rest of Friday. LinkedIn Live, thank you so much for listening. Please check out what Rico's doing. If you don't follow him already, you need to do that, because this man is on fire. Have a good weekend, everyone. Go with grace, as I always say. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, out of there.